I was in the middle of reviewing a blueprint for a new city park when my phone buzzed angrily on the desk. It was Mom. Her voice, usually so composed, was a hurricane of sobs and broken words. "Harper, it's the cabin." "Tessa, I don't know what to do." My heart sank. The cabin was our family's sanctuary, a place where we'd spent countless summers. But now it sounded like Tessa had turned it into a war zone. I could almost hear the echoes of shattered glass and the chaos of a party gone wrong through the phone. "Mom, slow down," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened?" She took a shaky breath. "Tessa threw a party. A big one. There's damage everywhere. Your father and I are we're too old for this, Harper." I glanced at the clock, the hands mocking me with their relentless ticking. My name is Harper, and I'm the eldest daughter in a family that's slowly unraveling. I'm an urban planner by trade, but lately it feels like I'm more of a crisis manager for the Winslow clan. "Okay, I'll handle it," I promised, though the words felt heavy. I hung up and sat back, the weight of responsibility pressing down on me like a physical force. I couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and dread. Tessa's antics were nothing new, but this was a new level of reckless. I grabbed my keys, telling myself that this time things would be different. This time I'd confront her. The drive to the cabin was a blur of autumn leaves and winding roads, my mind replaying every argument Tessa and I had ever had. She was always the golden child, charming her way out of trouble while I was left to pick up the pieces. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting what little peace my parents had left. When I pulled up to the cabin, my heart sank further. The place looked like a battlefield. Beer cans littered the yard, and one of the porch railings was dangling precariously. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. Inside, the damage was even worse. Furniture was overturned, and the air was thick with the smell of stale alcohol. I found Tessa in the living room, her expression a mix of defiance and something else, maybe shame. "Harper," she said, a forced smile playing on her lips. "I didn't think you'd come." "Of course I came," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "What were you thinking, Tessa?" She shrugged, looking away. "It was just a party. You're always so uptight." I could feel my frustration bubbling over. "This isn't just about a party. You've crossed a line, Tess. Mom and Dad are exhausted. They can't handle this." Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. "Maybe they should just sell the place then." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. I hadn't seen that coming. Cabin was supposed to be part of our legacy, a place for future generations. But Tessa's suggestion felt like a betrayal, a sign that she didn't value what we had. I took a step back, needing a moment to process. "We need to talk about this," I said finally, my voice firm. "All of it." As I left the cabin, I knew this was just the beginning. Tessa's actions had set off a chain reaction, and I was determined to see it through. But the question lingered. Could our family survive the storm she'd unleashed? As I stepped back into the cabin, the air was thick with the tension of unspoken words. Mom and Dad were already there, standing in the middle of the chaos like weary sentinels. Dad was trying to fix the broken railing while Mom picked up the remnants of last night's disaster. "Harper," Mom said, her voice a fragile thread. "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this." I shook my head, offering a small smile. "We'll get through it, Mom." The truth was, I wasn't just worried about the cabin. I was worried about what Tessa's behavior was doing to our family. I found her in the kitchen, arms crossed, glaring at the mess like it was someone else's fault. Greg was there too, lounging on a chair with an air of indifference that made my blood boil. "Nice party, Tessa," I said, my voice carrying a hint of sarcasm. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Harper. Spare me the lecture." Greg chimed in, smirking. "Yeah, lighten up. It was just a bit of fun." I ignored him, focusing on Tessa. "This isn't just about fun. You need to take responsibility for what you've done." Tessa's eyes flashed with anger. You're always so perfect, aren't you? Miss High and Mighty Harper swooping in to save the day. I felt a familiar frustration rising. This isn't about me, Tessa. It's about Mom and Dad. They can't handle this kind of stress. She looked away, a flicker of something softer crossing her face. Maybe I wouldn't have to act out if you didn't always make me feel like the screw-up. That caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her to admit to feeling overshadowed. But before I could respond, she stormed out, leaving the air crackling with unresolved tension. I turned to Greg, who was now looking at me with a lazy grin. You know, she's got a point. You do have a way of making people feel small. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. This isn't about making anyone feel small. It's about fixing what's broken. Greg shrugged, unfazed. Good luck with that. After he left, I found Mom sitting on the porch, her hands wringing together in her lap. I sat beside her, the silence between us filled with the sounds of the lake lapping against the shore. Harper, she said softly, I'm scared. I feel like I'm losing both of you. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We'll figure it out, Mom. I promise. But even as I said the words, I knew things were more complicated than ever. Tessa's resentment was deeper than I'd realized, and Greg's influence was a wild card I hadn't accounted for. As I drove away from the cabin, an idea began to form. Tessa wouldn't take responsibility, then I'd have to find a way to protect the cabin myself. The thought of installing security measures felt drastic, but it might be the only way to prevent further damage. I knew it would upset Tessa, but I couldn't let that stop me. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about drawing a line in the sand, a boundary that said enough was enough. As I made my way back to the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle. Returning to the city, I felt a gnawing unease. I had ordered the security cameras for the cabin, knowing it was a necessary step, but the decision sat heavy on my conscience. I was crossing a line I never thought I'd have to, spying on my own family. But I couldn't shake the image of Mom's weary face or Dad's silent frustration. A few days later, I sat at my desk, pretending to focus on a zoning map when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security system. My heart thudded as I opened the app, revealing footage of Tessa and Greg hosting yet another gathering at the cabin. This time, it was more than a party. It was a full-blown event, complete with strangers traipsing through the property like it was their own. I sat back, the weight of betrayal settling over me like a thick fog. How could she do this again? I knew I had to show the footage to Mom and Dad, but the thought of their heartbreak made my stomach churn. Later that evening, I found myself at my parents' house, the footage loaded on my laptop. Dad was in the living room, his eyes on the television but his mind clearly elsewhere. Mom was in the kitchen, the clatter of dishes a comforting, familiar sound. Hey, Mom, Dad, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. They both looked up, concern etched in their faces. I set the laptop on the table, pressing play on the footage. As the images flickered across the screen, Mom's hand flew to her mouth, and Dad's expression hardened into a mask of quiet resolve. I didn't want to do this, I said softly, but Tessa left me no choice. Dad nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the screen. You did the right thing, Harper. We needed to know. Mom sighed, a sound so full of exhaustion it made my chest ache. What are we going to do? I took a deep breath, the words heavy on my tongue. I'll talk to her. She needs to understand the consequences of her actions. The next day, I called Tessa, asking her to meet me at a cafe downtown. She arrived late, her expression a mix of defiance and curiosity. As we sat down, I could feel the tension simmering between us, an unspoken challenge hanging in the air. I saw the footage, I said, cutting straight to the point. Her eyes narrowed. You're spying on me now? I'm protecting Mom and Dad, I replied, meeting her gaze. You're putting everything they care about at risk. Tessa leaned back, crossing her arms. You always think you know best, don't you? This isn't about being right, Tessa. It's about doing what's necessary. She scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. What do you want from me, Harper? I hesitated, searching for the right words. I want you to stop. Think about what you're doing. This isn't just about you. For a moment, I thought I saw a crack in her armor, a glimpse of the sister I used to know. But then her defenses snapped back into place, her expression hardening. Maybe you should worry about your own life for once, she said, standing up abruptly. I'm done with this. As she walked away, I felt a mix of frustration and sadness. Conversation hadn't gone as I'd hoped, and I was no closer to resolving the mess we were in. But as I watched her leave, I realized something important. I couldn't force Tessa to change. All I could do was protect what mattered and hope she'd find her way back to us on her own terms. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the security footage on my laptop when Jonah walked in. He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, sensing the storm brewing inside me. Harper, you okay? He asked, his voice a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. I nodded, though the truth was far from it. I just can't believe she's done it again, I said, gesturing to the screen. It's like she doesn't care about anything but herself. Jonah pulled up a chair beside me. Maybe she feels like she's got something to prove. Or maybe she's just lost. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I want to help her, Jonah. But every time I try, it's like she pushes me further away. He leaned back, thoughtful. Maybe she needs to hit rock bottom before she realizes what she's doing. His words lingered in the air, heavy with truth. But the thought of letting Tessa spiral out of control felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure of what lay below. The next morning, I decided to visit the cabin again. I needed to see the damage firsthand to understand the full extent of what we were dealing with. When I arrived, I found Mom and Dad sitting on the porch, their faces etched with worry. Harper, Dad said, his voice a low rumble. We've been talking. Mom nodded, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of hope and fear. We're thinking of selling the cabin. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What? No, you can't. This place means everything to us. Dad sighed, a deep, weary sound. It's just been too much, Harper. We're not as young as we used to be. I looked between them, my mind racing. Selling the cabin felt like giving up, like admitting defeat. But as I opened my mouth to argue, I saw the exhaustion in their eyes, the toll this was taking on them. Maybe we can find another way, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Let me talk to Tessa again. I'll make her understand. Mom reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. We trust you, Harper. But we can't keep living like this. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. As I left the cabin, I knew I had to act fast. Selling the cabin wasn't just about losing a place, it was about losing a part of our family's history. Back in the city, I decided to confront Tessa once more. I found her at a park, watching Mia and Oliver play. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded. We need to talk, I said, sitting beside her. She raised an eyebrow, a hint of defiance in her eyes. About what? More lectures. No, I replied, keeping my tone calm. About the cabin. Mom and Dad are thinking of selling it. Her eyes widened in surprise, the bravado slipping for a moment. They wouldn't. They might, I said, watching her closely. Unless we can show them things will change. She was silent, her gaze fixed on the children. I didn't realize it had gotten that bad, she admitted, her voice softer. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. We need to find a way to fix this, Tessa. Together. For the first time, she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded, a small but significant gesture. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. As I left the park, I felt a shift in the air, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could change. But the question remained. Could we pull together before it was too late? I was back at the cabin, pacing the living room, the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo with the tension between Tessa and me. I had hoped our last conversation would be a turning point, but instead it felt like we were teetering on the edge of a cliff. The door swung open and Tessa walked in, her expression a mix of defiance and something else, anxiety maybe. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I heard you talk to Mom and Dad about selling the cabin," she said, her voice sharp. I stopped pacing, meeting her gaze. "They're considering it, Tessa. They're exhausted." She crossed her arms, a defensive posture that was all too familiar. "And you think that's a good idea?" "I think it's their decision," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I also think we need to show them things can change." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion creeping in. "So, what's your plan? More spying? More telling them what to do?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I just want us to fix this together. But we can't do that if you keep pushing everyone away." She scoffed, the sound bitter. "You always think you know best, Harper. Always playing the hero." The accusation stung, but I pushed it aside. This isn't about being a hero. It's about saving what matters. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, Greg strolled in, his presence like a cold wind. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes calculating. Tessa shot him a look, a silent communication passing between them. "Nothing," she said, her voice suddenly softer. "Just family stuff." Greg smirked, turning his attention to me. "You know, Harper, not everything needs fixing. Sometimes people just need space." His words were like a veiled threat, a suggestion that maybe I was the problem. I felt my patience wearing thin, the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "Space isn't going to solve this," I said firmly. "We need to act before it's too late." Greg shrugged, an infuriatingly casual gesture. "Maybe you should let Tessa handle her own life." I turned to Tessa, searching her face for some sign of understanding. "Tessa, please. We need to work together on this." She hesitated, her defenses flickering for a moment. But then she shook her head, stepping back into Greg's shadow. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice distant. As they left, I felt a surge of helplessness. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I was running out of options. My mind raced, trying to find a way to break through the wall Tessa had built around herself. Later that night, as I sat on the porch staring out at the moonlit lake, Jonah called. His voice was a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink. "Harper, you okay?" I sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of the day. "I don't know what to do, Jonah. It's like everything I try just pushes her further away." He paused, considering his words. "Maybe you need to change the approach. Sometimes people need to see the consequences before they can change." His words resonated, a seed of an idea taking root. Maybe it was time to show Tessa what losing the cabin would really mean. Not just for her, but for all of us. As I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time for a drastic step, something that would force all of us to confront the reality we were facing. I just hoped it wouldn't be too late. Cabin loomed in the distance, a silent witness to the chaos that had unfolded over the past few weeks. I had called a family meeting, hoping to finally address the issues tearing us apart. But as I stood on the porch, waiting for everyone to arrive, doubt gnawed at my resolve. Could we really fix this, or was I just setting myself up for failure? Tessa and Greg arrived first, their expressions a mix of defiance and wariness. Mom and Dad followed, their faces lined with worry. We gathered in the living room, the air thick with tension. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. "We need to talk about what's happening with the cabin and how it's affecting us." Tessa crossed her arms, her posture defensive. "We've talked about this, Harper. You just want to control everything." I shook my head, trying to keep my frustration in check. "This isn't about control. It's about protecting what's important to us." Greg leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "And who decides what's important?" "You." Before I could respond, Mom spoke up, her voice trembling. We're tired, girls. This fighting, it's tearing us apart. Dad nodded, his gaze steady. We need to find a way to move forward. I looked at Tessa, hoping to find some sign of understanding. Tess, I know you feel like you're being pushed aside, but we need to work together. She hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. But then Greg whispered something in her ear, and her expression hardened. I'm tired of being treated like the problem, she snapped. Maybe it's time I just walk away. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. My heart sank. This was my worst fear come true, Tessa cutting ties, leaving us fractured and broken. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tessa no. But Tessa was already standing, her decision made. I'm done, Harper. I'm done with all of it. As she turned to leave, something inside me snapped. I couldn't let her walk away, not like this. Tessa, wait. She paused, her back to me, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. What? I swallowed hard, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. She turned, her eyes searching mine for sincerity. You mean that? Yes, I said, the word a plea. I just want us to be okay. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. But then Greg stepped forward, his presence a cold shadow. Come on, Tess. Let's go. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me standing in the wreckage of what could have been. I sank into a chair, the weight of failure pressing down on me. Cabin felt emptier than ever, a hollow shell of the memories we had once shared. As night fell, I sat on the porch, staring out at the lake. The moon cast a silvery glow over the water, a stark contrast to the darkness inside me. I had tried so hard to protect my family, to hold us together, but now it seemed like I had only pushed us further apart. Jonah called, his voice a lifeline in the silence. Harper, how did it go? I closed my eyes, the tears finally spilling over. I lost her, Jonah. I lost her. He was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. It's not over yet. You're stronger than you think. But as I sat there, the night stretching endlessly before me, it was hard to believe his words. The road to healing seemed impossibly long, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to walk it. Cabin was quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. I stood on the porch, my heart pounding as I waited for Tessa. Today was the day we would finally lay everything bare, face the truths we'd both been avoiding. I had called her, asking for one last chance to talk, to find some way forward. She arrived alone, her face set in a mask of determination. As she stepped onto the porch, the tension between us was palpable, a living thing that crackled in the air. Tessa, I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Thank you for coming. She nodded, her eyes wary. You said you wanted to talk. I gestured to the chairs and we both sat, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. I'm sorry for everything that's happened, I said, the words heavy with sincerity. I never wanted things to get this far. She looked away, her expression unreadable. You always make it sound so simple, Harper. But it's not. I know it's not, I replied, leaning forward. But we have to find a way to move past this. For Mom and Dad. For us. She sighed, a sound full of frustration and something else, regret maybe. I felt like I was always in your shadow. Like nothing I did was ever good enough. Her admission hung in the air, a raw, unvarnished truth that cut deeper than I expected. I reached for her hand, a tentative gesture of reconciliation. Tessa, you're not in my shadow. You never were. I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. For a moment, she hesitated, then took my hand, her grip firm. I'm sorry too. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. As we sat there, the weight of misunderstandings and unspoken grievances began to lift, replaced by a fragile hope. But before we could say more, Greg appeared, his presence a sudden, unwelcome intrusion. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Tessa released my hand, her defenses snapping back into place. "We're just talking." Greg's eyes narrowed, his gaze shifting between us. "Talking about what?" "Selling the cabin." I stood, meeting his challenge head on. "We're talking about fixing things, Greg. Something you wouldn't understand." He smirked, a cold, calculating expression. "You think you can just fix everything with a few words?" "No," I replied, my voice firm. "But it's a start." Tessa looked between us, her expression conflicted. "Greg, maybe we should go." "No," I said, turning to her. "Stay. We need to finish this." Greg stepped closer, his posture aggressive. "Tessa doesn't need to listen to you anymore." But Tessa surprised us both. "Greg, stop," she said, her voice steady. "I want to hear what Harper has to say." Tension shifted, the power dynamic subtly changing. Greg faltered, his confidence shaken. "Tessa." She shook her head, a quiet determination in her eyes. "I'm tired of fighting, Greg. I just want peace." In that moment, I saw the real Tessa, the sister I'd missed, the one who wanted to heal as much as I did. It was an unexpected twist, a revelation that changed everything. As Greg retreated, I turned back to Tessa, my heart full of hope. "We can do this, Tess. We can make things right." She nodded, a small, tentative smile breaking through. "I'd like that." Together, we stepped off the porch, leaving behind the shadows of our past. Path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time it felt possible. As we walked toward the lake, the themes of revenge and justice faded, replaced by the promise of forgiveness and understanding. Cabin was bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun, casting long shadows across the porch where my family had gathered. Felt surreal, seeing us all together, the tension that had once defined us now replaced by a tentative peace. Tessa sat beside me, her expression softer, more open than I'd seen in years. Mom and Dad were inside, preparing dinner, their laughter a comforting backdrop to the evening. I watched as Tessa played with Mia and Oliver on the grass, their giggles a sweet reminder of what we were working to preserve. Jonah joined me on the porch, handing me a glass of iced tea. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. I smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through me. "We did it," I corrected, grateful for his unwavering support. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tessa joined us, her eyes meeting mine with a newfound understanding. "Harper, I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady. "I want to try something new. Maybe event planning. I think I'd be good at it." The idea was unexpected, but it felt right. "That sounds perfect, Tessa. I know you'll be amazing." She smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile that lit up her face. "And there's something else," she added, her voice tinged with excitement. "I'm expecting another baby." The news was a joyful surprise, a promise of new beginnings and the chance to build something beautiful together. "That's wonderful, Tessa," I said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so happy for you." As we embraced, I felt the last remnants of our old conflicts fade away, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. We were finally moving forward, leaving behind the shadows of the past. Later, as we sat around the dinner table, laughter and conversation flowing easily, I realized how far we'd come. Cabin, once a symbol of our division, had become a place of healing and hope. It was a testament to our resilience, our ability to overcome even the deepest rifts. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself alone on the porch, the cool night air a gentle embrace. Jonah joined me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "You okay?" he asked, his presence a comforting anchor. I nodded, the peace of the moment settling deep within me. "Yeah, I am. I really am." We stood there in silence, the stars twinkling above us like a promise of endless possibilities. I knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but I also knew we were stronger together, ready to face whatever challenges came our way. A subtle twist lingered in my mind, a question of what the future might hold. But it didn't feel daunting. It felt exciting, a chance to continue growing and learning. As I looked out at the lake, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey we'd taken, the lessons we'd learned. In that moment, I realized that the themes of revenge and justice had evolved into something deeper: understanding, forgiveness, and the courage to embrace change. And as I prepared to embark on my own journey into motherhood, I knew I was ready, armed with the wisdom and compassion I'd gained along the way.